God's doing through you. So thank you again for being here today, and if you'll give your attention to the screens now.
It is a joy to be here today. I want to thank the worship team. Where are you, the worship team? There you go. Thanks for ruining my makeup. I felt the Spirit of God here, and it was great to be here. I've known Mark for a long time, like he said. We go way back when you had a little church in a shopping center. We called it my mom's church. And my mother passed away in 2004. We had her memorial service at Mark's church. And yesterday I was talking to my 95-year-old dad, and he said, Mary, when the time comes for my memorial service, I want you to call Mark and see if we can have it there. So my dad sent you a gift, hot off the press. This is probably public, what do they call it? Promotion. My dad just wrote a book, 95 years old, World War II veteran, and you get the first copy. That is from my dad to you. Yes. Thank you for having me. Oh, anyway, do we have any gardeners in the room? Anybody that grows fruit or vegetables or flowers, gardeners? Okay. I want to just say to you, as I speak, I want you to think a little bit about gardening. You go and you dig in the soil and you plant the seeds and you water them and you put fertilizer on them and everything. But there's one thing you cannot do. You cannot make that item grow. You cannot make that seed sprout. Only God can do that. And when you hear my stories and when you see the video, that's what I want you to remember. I may be there digging in the dirt a little bit, but I don't get the honor and the glory. God gets the honor and glory because he's the one making the things happen down there. I'm just lucky enough to be there watching it, digging in the soil, sweating a little bit. It's hot there too. So just keep that in mind as you think about what you saw in the video, as you hear the little bit that I want to share today. And I have a ton I could share, but I'm trying to keep it down to 10 minutes. So good luck with that, y'all that don't know me. We think my stepmother talks a lot. Anyway, basically, just in a nutshell, what is God doing in Guatemala, where I'm at, in Rabinal? I moved down there 8 years ago full-time, and 7 years ago, I started a feeding program. There was a big need in the village for not just the children, but the elderly people. The elderly people have been through, really anybody over 40 has been through massacres. They used to live in a village up in the mountains, and in 1981 and 82, there were a series of 5 massacres where half of the village was wiped out. Take just a minute and close your eyes and think about your family. Now imagine half of them dead. Somebody just came in and killed them. It's tragic. Women, lots of widows that have lost their husbands, men that have lost their wives, they've lost sons, they've lost grandchildren, they've had babies ripped from their arms and dashed against the rocks. And these are the people that we're dealing with. And these elderly people have no government help because they never worked other than in the cornfields. So we're working with the elderly. We're feeding them. They get 400, those that get it, they don't all get 400 quetzales a month. That's $50. That's not enough, even by poverty level, to feed yourself. So they depend on family. But then the family might have 6 kids, 8 kids, even a dozen kids. They can't feed grandma and grandpa. So we're helping in the feeding program to feed. Right now we've got 55 elderly and children. So that's a big part of what we do. We've also got a student program. We don't have a school, but we help kids go to school. We pay their tuition and things like that through sponsors. You saw we have a radio program. Between myself and Shenny and Audi, two of the girls that work with me, we cover 12 hours a week on the Christian radio, playing music, preaching a little bit. I don't consider myself a preacher, but I share. Let's just say I share. So on the radio, and we love it. It goes out to villages that we can't get to. Down in Guatemala, it's not like here. Here we don't really listen to the radio. We have our favorite, whatever they have nowadays, thing that you plug in. You modern people. But in Guatemala, it's not like that. They turn the radio on in the morning, and they listen to it all day long. And so people tell me, I turn the radio, todo volumen. How many of you speak Spanish? Eileen, Rachel, a little bit. Todo volumen, all the volume, so that their neighbors that don't have a radio can hear. And so that's we get into homes that we would otherwise never get into. We also visit the prisons. Basically, up until now, we've only visited young men. They're from the village. The first guy that I visit, the main guy that I visit, death threatened me the first year I was in Guatemala. He sent word through my maid and said, tell the white girl she has few days left to live. and we're going to kill her in front of you so you'll know it's your fault that she died. It's kind of hard news to hear. But anyway, God showed me how to win his heart. I visit him in prison about once a year now. And believe me, they're like you see on TV. It's pretty bad in there. Then we also have a youth group. I'm going to take a drink of water. We have a youth group that started 2 years ago. A seed was planted 2 years ago. I had a young Guatemalan boy that came to live with me when he was 8. His name is Rudy. And 2 years ago, he was shot and killed. I won't get into the story because I'll just end up crying the whole time. But Rudy was shot and killed, and he was 13 years old. And Shani, my right-hand woman, and I got talking after he died, and we knew that Rudy was in heaven. He had been saved. He was baptized. He's in heaven. But what about all these other teenagers in Pacush, in the village? I have the feeding program and the student program. What about them? So we decided to start a youth group. First night, 18 teenagers came, 14 years and up. 18 of them came. Now, every Wednesday night, we have 60 to 70 teenagers at the youth group. This is a gang-infested village. The gangs are almost non-existent. That is one of those things I'm talking about God doing. I can't make the gangs go away. They either are dead or they're in prison. That's why we go to the prison. But they're changing. They're getting touched in the prison. Sometimes 10, 11 o'clock at night, I'm texting Mateo, this other guy in Coban prison, and encouraging him in the Lord and encouraging him to keep following God. And so the youth group has grown. We've also got now, we're teaching them music. We're teaching guitar and keyboard lessons to them. We're going to start a youth band soon. We've got people that have donated equipment for us. They've donated sound equipment, some guitars, different things, keyboard. And we're working with the youth on that. They're getting saved. It's not easy. How many of you work with teenagers? It's not easy. They have all the same problems the kids in the United States have. They want to commit suicide. They cut themselves. There's rape. There's molesting in the home. There's drugs. A lot of them smoke pot. We had one show up 2 weeks ago drunk. Come on in. Let him hear about Jesus. So we're working with them. Some of them have gotten saved. They go to church, but they keep coming back to youth group. And so that's what we're working with there. Because of that, we decided, well, we didn't decide. God actually spoke to me very clearly about a year after Rudy was killed that I needed to buy a piece of land and build an outreach center. I did not want to build. I have no desire. I am already busy enough. I argued. Do you ever argue with God? I'm like, I don't want to build a building. I've got so much going on already. But God made it very clear. One of the verses he showed me when I was arguing with him, and this was a very specific moment. I won't tell the whole story, but it was a very specific moment where I found myself in my church that I go to in Guatemala on my knees at the altar crying. And then I got up and sat down, and this is what they preached about that night. It's in Isaiah 58:11. See if I can read without crying. Isaiah 58:11. The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land and will strengthen your frame. You will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. And I was so sure. And so I said, okay, God, if you want to do this, you're going to have to provide the money. I don't have $1 million quetzales to do what you're asking me to do. And he opened up the floodgates. We bought the land. Now he's continuing to open doors so that we can build a facility. We have actually started building about 2 months ago. And one day I was sitting talking to a lady from Wisconsin. Her name's Susie Bailey. I was talking to her, and I was sharing this verse with her, and I was so excited to share the verse with her. She says, Mary, have you read the verse that's right before 11? Read 10. I'm like, okay. So I looked up Isaiah 58, and I read verse 10. Oh, boy. Oh, mercy. It says, oh, boy. And if you spend yourselves on behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will arise in the darkness, and your night will become like noonday. Verse 11, the Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land and will strengthen your frame. You will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. Hallelujah. We're naming the outreach center La Fuente. That means the fountain. When we had the well dug there, because we need a well, we had a well dug. The guys that dug the well didn't even know me. I always send a front person, because if they see that I'm doing it, they want more money. So I had a front person. He didn't even know that I was going to name it La Fuente, the fountain. And when he dug the well, he said, wow, he says, we have a good fountain of water here. It was like, glory to God. Anyway, like Mark told you, Butch, where's Butch? There you are. Butch is bringing a team down in September. So if you're interested in coming down there and seeing firsthand, seeing the feeding program, looking at the facility that we're building, we're also going to be having a fiesta. Who knows what fiesta is? Do you eat at Taco Bell? Okay. Fiesta. We're having a fiesta for the grandparents. We do it every year at my house. They come on September 15th. It's Independence Day in Guatemala, and we have a big fiesta for these grandparents. And we have live marimba music and tamales. We do a little dancing. And can Baptists dance? Oh, boy. Well, not very well. I like that. Yeah, I'm right in there. So anyway, hope you guys can come when Butch comes, and I think Eileen Creek is coming. Who else is planning to? You're coming? Anybody else? There we go. Okay, wonderful. Okay. Anyway, I just want to end with this. There might be somebody here today that is thinking, well, God can't use me. He can use Mary because she's a missionary, and he can use Mark because he's the preacher, but he can't use me. You're wrong. God can use anybody. I didn't give you my back testimony today, but if you heard my back testimony, you would say, if God can use Mary, God can use anybody. And one of my favorite verses in the Bible is Jeremiah 29:11. And I want you to insert your name where it says you. It says, for I know the plans that I have for you. Insert your name there. I know the plans that I have for, whatever your name is, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, to give you hope and a future. And God has a plan for each person, not just the missionaries and the preachers, but for every single person. And that's what I want to leave you with today. I thank you for having me. It's a great to be here. Great to have my daughter Rachel with me. The hardest part of being a missionary is not sweating. It's not living without air conditioning. It's missing my family. It is good to have her here today. Anyway, thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm going to ask you to stay up here with me for another
I'll
minute.
stay here.
So. I know that our people would like to ask you some questions, so I'm going to ask you some questions on their behalf, if that's okay. I already know more of your story than most of them do, but one of the things that we've talked about as a church a lot in the last couple of months is God's calling for each of our lives individually and how that gets worked out. Now, you grew up for 17 years on the mission field in Michoacan, Mexico, but you didn't spend most of your life on the mission field. Would you share a word about what you used to do when you lived in Fairhope and how you went from that to gradually coming to a recognition of God's calling for the thing that you're doing now?
Okay, when I moved to Fairhope, Alabama, I had been living in Michigan. I had been married for 20 years to a Mississippi boy, and we got divorced. And Satan told me, God cannot use you anymore. And I believed him. And one day I was sitting, I actually traded church for the bars for a while after my divorce. I was sitting in a biker bar, smoking a cigarette, drinking a whiskey sour, not thinking about God. And I heard his still small voice say, just ask me a simple question. He said, is this what you want with your life? And I decided this is not going to be my life. And I got up and walked out of the bar that night. Things didn't change overnight, but I moved to Fairhope. Slowly things began to change here. I had a business, truck brokering business here. We grossed we were a multi-million-dollar company. I was a co-owner with an aunt, and it's such a long story. So many details. But there came a moment when God said, I want you to leave it all. Lay down your nets, like he told the fishermen when they had been fishing all night and they were casting their nets on different sides of the boat. And finally, Jesus came and he said, fish out of this side of the boat. And so they did, and their nets were so full they had to call others to help them. And then the verse after that says, and then they left their nets and followed him. And that's what I did. And it's a lot of details to it, but God just made it very clear to me. He confirmed it through other people. Very clear that that was what I was supposed to do. And I believe I was 50. I'm going to tell y'all my age. Who cares? I was 54 when I moved to Guatemala. Do the math. I've been there 8 years. So, but you might think it took God a long time to prepare her, but I think part of it is that's just it. He's preparing us. If you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer or any other thing, you have to go through a time of preparation. And that's what God has been doing, preparing me since the day I was born.
And as I recall, and it's true for all of us, there have been different phases of what that calling has looked like, because before you've spent the last 8 years there was a period where God was bringing your heart there, but you were, if I remember correctly, going and becoming increasingly involved. I remember a cow named Popcorn that became a part of the story of you getting involved there. But there wasn't the first cow that you bought for somebody down, or maybe the first goat named Popcorn down there. But that you just began to be more and more involved in helping people before God moved you there.
Yeah, I started going to Guatemala part-time in 1990, and then started going to this particular village in the year 2000. And we would visit the village where the massacres had been. Some people have returned there and rebuilt, and we bought them cows and boats and goats. Remember the boats and goats? So I had been working down there part-time for quite a while before I actually felt the call to move full-time.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm just curious to hear, of all the things that you see, what are you most encouraged about? Either in the ministry that God's got you doing or just what God's doing in Guatemala. What encourages you the most?
Boy, how to narrow it down. Probably seeing the young people. Seeing the young people getting on fire for God, starting to go to church, wanting to be part of the worship group.
Awesome. Good stuff. Now we're fixing to shift gears and talk about the final portion of Ephesians today, the spiritual warfare portion. Every missionary has to face that. I'm curious, just for our people to hear firsthand, some of what you experience on the mission field in the realm of dealing with spiritual warfare where you are and how you cope with that.
Well, there's definitely spiritual warfare to deal with. I don't know if it's more prevalent down there than in the States, because I haven't had any experience with it in the States. But aside from death threats, I think I've gotten 3 or 4 death threats. I kind of lose count. But there's a lot of witchcraft. And if anybody gets mad at you for anything, then they pull witchcraft on you. We've actually found some witchcraft items hidden in my house. In one of the bathrooms, we pulled the drawer. We had a smell in the bathroom that wasn't normal. And so my housekeeper, yeah, we have housekeepers in Guatemala, so it's not that bad. But she pulled out the drawers completely trying to find it, and hidden under there were some papers in the form of a cross with crosses written on it and the four corners burned. It was obvious witchcraft stuff. But I just, I keep remembering the Bible verse, no weapon formed against me shall prosper. And so we just pray and trust God.
Amen.
And
Amen.
if God allows something to happen, well, that's okay too.
Well, we are so grateful for you and the work that you're doing. We're glad that you're here. Following the service, if you have just your heart stirred at the thought of maybe being able to go in the future and take part in the mission trip, or just wanting to be more involved in praying and supporting what's going on, Mary and Butch are going to be in the grace room immediately following the service. We'll invite you to step in for just an informal Q&A time with them.
We can give them.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay.
Would you show a little freedom love? Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Thanks.